What if I told you that fat isn't the enemy? It's actually essential for your health, that eating fat can boost your brain health, balance your hormones, and even help you burn more fat. Today, we're cutting through the most confusing topic in wellness: fat. Good fat, bad fat, and everything in between. Let's get into it. Welcome to WellYES. I'm here with Sarah Greenfield. Or
Hi.
I, a huge fan of the brand, but also like a wellness expert who has been in the field of health and nutrition for well over a decade now. And it's also her birthday today. So happy birthday, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you. I just got my dietitian recertification. So officially 15 years as a dietitian. Thought that was
Congrats.
pretty
So,
exciting.
so today it's so two milestones basically.
Big stuff happening over
Birthday.
here.
Anything fun planned later for the day?
Yes, we're doing a cacao ceremony, which
Oh my
I'm very
God.
excited
That
about
is
because
so exciting. I did one last Wednesday, believe it or
you
not.
did.
Yes, we did
How
like
fun.
it was the full moon and we wanted to really we did yoga, breath work, meditation, and cacao ceremony and a fire ceremony. So it was great. It was one of the
Yes.
best evenings I had in a long time. So it was truly special. So that sounds lovely.
Yeah, I'm very excited. And we're going to try and do it with children around. So we'll see how that goes. And, we're just going to buckle up.
Well, cacao ceremonies are really, really amazing. So
Yeah.
happy birthday and
Thank you.
all the very best for the year ahead.
Thank
As
you.
always. But it's nice to see you. We have lots to talk through about today, actually.
Yes.
It's a huge topic. Probably one of the most, like, it's one of those topics that everybody has an opinion on, but then when you do actually deep dive, there's just so much misinformation out there. So we said, like, why not do a podcast on the topic of fat, which is one of the most understood micronutrients out there. So we have to cut this out. It's not a micronutrient. It's a
It's a
macronutrient.
macronutrient.
Yeah, so we got to cut this one out.
Potato, potato.
Okay, exactly. But we'll edit this out. Okay, let's start again. Basically, today we're talking about fat, one of the most misunderstood macronutrients. And what if we told you that fat isn't actually the enemy that is perceived to be by many? But there are a lot of like myth to debunk here. I think a lot of science to dig in as well. And I think what would be really helpful if we started at the very beginning, and the history of why fat has actually such a bad reputation, which I thought was really fascinating. And I don't want to start today with you conspiracy theory here, but this has been well documented, so I think we have enough evidence to talk about it. It all started, I believe, in the 60s, when there were like suggestions that sugar could cause coronary disease, and as a result, the sugar industry sponsored a research or a review of research, if you will, that's out there that sort of like slightly ignored the role of sugar when it comes to like heart health and overemphasized, I would say, fat as a culprit that, has negative impacts. And of course, excess fat, we know that is not good for you, but there's much more to it. But as a result, we had this fat-free craze in the 80s. I still remember everything was suddenly fat-free, and I was like, that's impossible. How can it be sort of like, this product that I thought must be pure fat can be fat-free? But anyway, we had that. And what we have seen over the decades, despite all these changes in the food, or in the way food was engineered, our obesity rates continue to go up. Heart disease was always continues to be on the up as well. So there's obviously something that is not so great about demonizing one thing and ignoring others. And I think in order to understand fat, we really want to do a deep dive here and like, what is fat? What are, good fats? What are bad fats? How much do you need? What sources of fat? So let's dive right in there
Amazing.
and start at the very high level, Sarah. And yeah, what is fat?
So fat, like you said, is a very important macronutrient, and we use it throughout our body for many different things. We use it as a source of energy. We use it to protect our organs. We use it to break down and process micronutrients. So it's really wildly important to our overall health and function. A big part of our brain is made up of fat. So it's very, very important and necessary.
Got it. And just sort of to understand, there are different types of fats, right? There are
Yeah.
saturated fats, there are unsaturated fats. Within unsaturated fats, there's subfamilies, if you will. There are trans
Yes.
fats.
Yes.
Can you just give us the lay of the land here for a second, and then we can maybe dive into, what are the good fats and what are the bad fats?
Yes. So we do have many different types of fats. We have mono and polyunsaturated fats, which are two that we talk about a lot when it comes to plant-based foods. And then we have saturated fats, which are more animal-based. I mean, there's plant foods that have that as well, but those are kind of the three main ones. And then we have trans fat. So I would say the unsaturated fats being the poly and mono, and then the saturated and trans fats are kind of our general fats that we're talking about when we dive into this area.
And when we speak about good fats, what is an example of a good fat?
So we're already starting off now where it gets controversial because it
I
can be
I knew
so
this was going.
hard to
I knew
quantify.
I
Like
knew
this is
it.
my thing, right? I'm always like, well, there's never a black and white answer. If we're looking at labs and we're assessing like what is good and bad fat, HDL is generally considered the good fat that we want to see in our body. So that's a really good way to look at black and white. And LDL, triglycerides, those are kind of signifying our not so healthy fat. So when we look at it that way, we can see good and bad. When we're coming into the dietary space, it's really tough to say this is bad and this is good. I think one that I can pretty confidently stand on as a bad fat is trans fats. Like those are pretty historical, like not so good for your body. When it comes to saturated fat, it's quantity and quality, and along with, even unsaturated fats like the monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, that's where we get into seed oils, which is a whole world of craziness. And that has been particularly demonized. So I'm excited to kind of dig through this a little bit more.
So let's start with the trans fats because it sounds like that's really where the evidence is probably more black and white, if you will, right? What's an
Yeah.
example of a trans fat?
So that's something you can see more in processed foods.
I
Anything
see.
that's hydrogenated is typically going to be your trans fat. So when you see like hydrogenated soybean oil, hydrogenated corn oil, anything with that word is a trans fat. And typically, I haven't seen the research yet to say that there is any argument for that being good. So we're going to go with like just avoid.
All right, and the way to recognize these things, they're really processed, right? So that's
Yeah.
like, it's the opposite of like I would say the virgin olive oil that is cold
Yes.
pressed and all this,
Yes.
which is a good fat, as we know, but maybe you have a different perspective, but that's my perception at least. So that's very, very clear. Let's talk about the saturated fats. What are example of those?
So saturated fats are things that are a little bit harder at room temperature, like butter, coconut oil, and then primarily you find the rest of it in animal products, like the hard, not the hard part, but the like when you see a piece of meat and it has the white marbling in it, that's
Yeah.
another form of saturated fat.
And those fats, you said there's a sort of like it gets a little less clear here, right? What is good for you
Yeah,
isn't,
it's
and it's more of a question of quantity, if I, read this back to you correctly.
quantity. Yeah. So you were talking kind of about the history of sugars and fat in that context. For me, I look at everything through the lens of being a dietitian. And my education and what I've seen trending in this space from my perspective was we had that moment where we demonized fat. Everything was like, low fat is good for you. And dietitians were promoting that. And then we got into specification like, no, actually, monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, and a certain percentage of your diet, that's ideal. And now what we're doing is looking more at quality and quantity and saying, even if you eat a ton of healthy fat, if you're doing it in a diet that's low in fiber and it's a primary amount of your calories, it's not a good thing either. So it's getting back to like quantity and quality and not just blanket statements of like, oh, yes, peanuts have polyunsaturated fat, so they're good. So just eat a tub of peanuts or drink a gallon of olive oil. It's like we have to kind of preface it with just the overall understanding of your dietary intake for the day.
So you want to combine fats with other
Yes.
foods
Yes.
basically and make sure your diet is, as they call it, balanced, really, right? Is there like a
Exactly.
rule of thumb of roughly how much percent of our diet should, have fats in it? And like do you have
Yeah,
sort of like a
ideally, if you look,
starting point here?
yeah, if you look at total caloric intake, you can do a couple different calculations. But when we're looking at general, like not a ketogenic diet or not any sort of extreme diet, I like to see about 20% of total calories of the day coming from fat. And then what that translates to for me, if I'm saying like, okay, on your plate or in a meal, it's about 1 to 2 tablespoons of high quality fat. So we're looking at things like you mentioned, like olive oil and avocado oil and avocados and nuts and seeds and all of the things that have good sources of the poly, mono, unsaturated fats.
And how about meat? I mean, like that's obviously a lot of people like really love a diet rich in meats.
Yeah.
What are the recommendations from your perspective?
Well, that then goes into the category typically of protein. So we kind of like, even though it's a both thing, that's really like when we're talking about meat consumption, it is going to be more protein categorically. So that's going to be probably 30% of calories overall are going to be coming from meat. But you can also look at, are you getting more lean quality meats? Like
Yeah.
what type of fat content? Like if you're just eating bacon all day long, that's going to be a fattier meat. And again, you can see it when you go to purchase meat. If you see that marbling, or if you're getting a ground meat and it'll have a percent fat on it, you want to opt for something that isn't so much fat. Or if you are, then you're having that in a small amount for one meal and not eating it every single day.
And do you have a perspective on like how many grams of fat per day roughly you would look at? And like, I mean, of course it depends on one's diet, but just to sort of like give some
Yeah,
sort of like rough guidance on like how much, like, because we love calorie counting, but I think that's as
I
far as the numbers
know.
go. I'm
It's
just
it's
curious.
it's hard to say gram wise because now you're going to put me on the spot to do math. That's my weakest point. But if we're looking at, let's say, a 1,200 calorie diet and 20% of that comes from fat, like how many calories is that? And then we can
240.
divide that to find. If I'm going to guess, I would say probably in the range of 10 to 20 grams of fat is going to be ideal for a day.
Okay, that's super helpful. Now let's move on to the more controversial part that you
Yes.
already alluded to a little bit, which are the unsaturated fats, because there is a lot of debate around seed oils specifically.
Yes.
And if you think about it, olive oil is a seed oil, if you will, right, to some degree. So talk me through a little bit why there is such controversy around seed oils.
Okay. I've thought about this for a long time because I've always been more like when we look at nutrition recommendations, I like always swing more far left. I'm like, yeah, seed oils are bad. So I've kind of had this lens of anything that's genetically modified. A lot of times, like rapeseed oil, canola oil, those things are genetically modified, mass produced, and those are seed oil. So I've thought for many years, like, let's just take that off the table. And I think when you're making general recommendations, especially in the health and wellness space, it's harder to sit down and have this explanation of like, well, this is where it's good and this is where it's bad. Like when
Yeah.
I'm working one-on-one with people, it's an easier conversation to have. But when you're doing general health education, it's much easier to categorize and say, canola oil is bad for you. And this is bad and this is good. But when we look at it and we look at the research, and I started to really dig into seed oil because there's more research now coming up that seed oils are actually not bad for you. And canola oil, there was a research study that I looked at that showed how canola oil in the right quantity can actually lower your LDL or your bad cholesterol and have heart healthy impacts. So that's when
Hmm.
we have to really kind of scale it back and look at the personalization and like, what are you eating? If you're drinking canola oil or if you're having it for every meal or if you're frying everything you eat in it, it's going to be problematic. But if you're having it in a small amount, there's actually benefit. So then it becomes very, nuanced and just a deeper conversation, which is why it's great to talk about it in these
Yeah, and I
platforms.
think I think that's generally the theme in health and wellness, where something becomes demonized and then everyone goes all in
Yes,
without understanding. Like, I think as most things in life, there's always a pro and a con. Like, let's face it, right? And I think we go from one extreme to the next, where we go like from so much fat to no fat, and then back to fats, and suddenly a diet all in like a very meat heavy diet. I mean, it moves very quickly, right? It's sometimes um
it
hard to
does.
keep track. So what we're trying to do here is to like sort of cut through the noise a little bit and understand like where is the actual science here. And it sounds like there is some science that would suggest smaller amounts of these oils are beneficial. Excess
Yes.
amounts are
Yes.
probably detrimental to your health, if I understand
And
correctly.
that's kind of how I navigate it. Cause I mean, I'm a dietitian. I'm also a consumer. I eat food too.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm looking at, all right, well, I'm not going to necessarily reintroduce canola oil into my diet, but I'm not going to be so crazed about it and not eat it ever. I'm going to be like, okay, in balance and moderation, it's fine. I'm still going to stick to the higher quality fats that I consume. Like I do like small amounts of coconut oil, olive oil, avocado oil, algae oil. Those are ones that I typically go for. Um, but again, if canola oil is in my world, I will still consume it and be like, this is fine. This has its health benefits. This has its
I shall
place.
live
I
tomorrow.
shall live. No food fear for me.
But so okay, let's talk about you. Like, what do you actually cook with? I'm really curious because there's like I don't know whether you have the same thing, but whenever I sit down for dinner and I tell people what I do, the amount of information I'm getting, I don't even comment anymore. It's hilarious. But
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, what do you actually cook with? Because obviously, some people said go with coconut oil. It's the best to cook with, or avocado oil only, and like, but then there's different smoke points, right? It's just very confusing.
Yeah.
What do you actually cook with as an RD or as a in your private life with a
In
kid
my in
with
my
a young
private life.
with a young kid?
I'm going to peel back the curtain here to my kitchen. So for me, it's variety. I have multiple oils on my counter. It's not just one, so that I can choose and kind of integrate it in, because diversity is always going to be the greatest asset that we have, period. So I have on my counter right now the algae oil I use a lot, avocado. Those are probably my two main go-tos. And then coconut oil, sometimes butter, and avocado oil. Sometimes I will cook with it, which I know is naughty, but it gets in there from time to time. I usually like to use it more as like a salad dressing or just on
Yeah.
things that are cold. That's ideal. But we were using a lot of butter for a year or two. And then my son started to get really congested from it. And then my husband and I both had our blood work done, and our LDL was high for the first time ever. And I was like, how fascinating. Time to scale back on the butter. So again, it's like you consume these things, we do our best, and then we check in with our body and see like, how is that actually working in practicality? Because I've had clients that drink the butter coffee and their fat lipid profile looks amazing. So it's so interesting to see kind of how people process things in different capacities.
That is interesting. Let's move away from your kitchen and move back into the human body. And let's try to. So now we covered like good fats, bad fats, and understood roughly, the lay of the land, if you will. Let's talk about the importance of fat actually to your different organs, and maybe we start with the brain. I think there are a lot of conversations around like nootropics right now and brain health, longevity, cognitive health, etc. And the reason why I'm really interested in this is like, if you look at drugs like Ozempic, for example,
Mhm.
there's now suggestions it also benefits your brain health in the long run because it's good for heart health. And as a consequence, your brain, ages better, if you will. And I think it's a big topic, actually. People will live longer, and understanding what we can do to support brain health in the long run. And I think we need to really talk about fat here since the brain is made up of a lot of fat, if you will. So I'm just curious, like, on what your perspective is like on fats for brain health.
So I think fats in the diet are important for the whole body. I don't think we necessarily have to eat more fat to have better brain health, but it has to be part of the equation. When we're growing and our brain's developing in younger years, that's when it's really important. Like during pregnancy, when you're building a child in your body, there is a higher recommendation for fat, specifically omega-3s, the DHA, the EPA. Those are really important because you're actively building the brain. And then kids have a higher need for that as well because they're in that process. When we get older, we don't necessarily have to eat more fat to achieve that. We have to go back to making sure we have adequate levels of omega-3s in our diet. And that's going to be very brain healthy and brain promoting. So that's where I like to really dive in and say, are we getting adequate omega-3s, like a good quality fish oil or walnuts or salmon or purslane, which is a vegetable source of it. So like where chia seeds, hemp seeds, where can we bring that into the diet? Because the standard American diet is typically pretty stripped out of omega-3s. Like we don't eat a lot of omega-3 rich foods like you would see in a Mediterranean diet or diets outside of the United States.
Yeah, and I think that's something that has been consistent over the last 2 decades. Like whenever we look
Yeah.
into the topic of fat here at Hum, it is always about like omegas threes and like increasing um that nutrient in your diet as opposed to like all omegas, if you will. There's obviously omega threes, there's six, there's nine, I believe, right? I mean, there's so many omegas out there. Tell me a little bit like, what are omegas really like what should we like when we see that on a label? What does it really mean? And then within omega three, maybe unpack EPA and DHA as well. I would be interested in that.
Yeah, so omega-3s generally, I think the best way to think about them is they're very anti-inflammatory. So they help our bodies regulate inflammation more effectively. And with the six and nines, those are beneficial as well. I think where it gets tricky and where the maybe the seed oil conversation spun out of control is that the binding site for omega-6 and omega-3 is the same. So they kind of compete for the same binding site to then get into the body and be effective. So if you think that that's at least where I kind of think maybe that was demonized, because if you have too much omega-6, now you're not going to get your body to utilize all of these omega-3s. But generally, if you can get a good balance, that's where you're really going to start to see positive anti-inflammatory effects. And when it comes to brain health, there was a big kind of, I don't know how long ago it was, but there was kind of this generalized understanding that the blood-brain barrier was impermeable. Like things couldn't get through the blood-brain barrier, maybe a couple things, but now they're like, oh, actually more things than we realize can
Hmm.
access and travel through the blood-brain barrier. And inflammatory cytokines and markers are one of those. So when we see things like Ozempic and these GLP-1s, they actually help to kind of turn down that flame and decrease inflammation and prevent this inflamed brain that we see in a lot of neurodegenerative diseases.
So it's going back to the good old anti-inflammatory diet, basically, that helps you
It,
make your
yeah,
heart healthier and your
that's
blood.
the name of the game. Inflammation is the fire that kicks off all of these
Mhm.
metabolic processes that are trying to be protective. But then when they get kind of out of control, they start to do things that aren't beneficial for our body.
And when it comes to omega-3 specifically, there's DHA, which is very important while you're pregnant, for example, right? You spoke to that earlier.
Yeah.
But there's also EPA. And there is a rule of thumb, roughly about a 2-to-1 ratio for the two, if you're looking at high quality fish oils, for example. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I mean, that's essentially where you're going to get the most anti-inflammatory benefits, and the most benefits from that is when you get that breakdown of the DHA and EPA. It's still like I always look at it like, how can you get it in the food? How do we, like, the ratio is important, but if you can get high quality food sources as well and a high
Yeah.
quality fish oil supplement that recognizes that ratio, that's going to be super beneficial for the body.
And it's really interesting you mentioned this because, when we looked into supply chains and like how to make actually really high quality fish oil, you have to look at like, what fish is actually a good source of
Yeah.
omega threes. And it turns out that small fish, sardines, anchovies, mackerel, they're the fish that eat the plankton. They metabolize it and then store that as a sort of like omega three in their fat cells, if you will. And
Yeah.
that's really the best quality fish oil. Whereas bigger fish are a bit more like predators, like salmon, for example. And they eat a lot of other things and tend to be also higher in mercury.
Yes.
So when it comes to an actual fish oil source, that is really something to pay attention to. Like, and I think the easy way to remember it is like small fish are
Small.
better because they're like lower down the food chain, if you will, and they
Yes.
have more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff, if you will. Um,
Yes.
and also making sure that the fish, I mean, this is not a question of the nutrient profile, but the fish are responsibly sourced. I think that, wild caught is really preferable, and making sure that there's a
Yeah.
sustainable angle to it as well, because obviously we have to pay attention to the livestock around the world, basically, and like making sure we're not
Yes.
depleting the oceans of fish, if you will. So I think those are the two things to pay attention to: the kind of fish and how the actual fish is sourced. Do you have anything else to say about that topic?
Well, I mean, I think that goes back to what we had talked about in the beginning about quality. And when you're focused on quality and sustainability within how food is gathered, that has a really important health benefit as well, because now you're caring for the world and the environment. So I mean, that is not in isolation. That's really important when we're thinking about feeding ourselves and also not making as big of an imprint on the earth. So yeah, I love that.
And do you have a perspective around, because obviously you can get EPA and DHA from fish, but also algae, for example, is an example. Is there a difference? I believe the amount of EPA you get in those fish in those oils is slightly lower. Does it matter, or
Well, I mean, to me, it's like, can you get the biggest bang for your buck? So I'm going to start with a higher dose if I can. Just, I think that's always the smartest way to do it and bioavailable. So yeah, I mean, I opt for. I'm very pro sustainably sourced animal sources of things. Algae is great as well. Like you can get it from different sources. It's a little harder depending on how you're taking it in to like, it doesn't taste that great, but
yeah?
you develop your palate and you just do your best and go for diversity.
Well, listen, this was super helpful. And I think I'm like 1 inch closer to understanding fats. I think the bottom line to me is like, look, there's still so much to look into. But I think as a general rule of thumb is like everything in moderation, a
Yeah.
balanced diet, and paying attention to the source of which, where the fat comes from, are really helpful tips. So this was super helpful. Let's move on to our next segment, which is our well yeses and well nos for the week,
Yay.
basically. So, Sarah,
Yes.
what are yours this week?
The well, yes, is the HRV training. I think we had mentioned just stress, nervous system. It's really important to tap into how you are being regulated. So things that measure your HRV are really, really awesome. Dry brushing, which is a great way to stimulate the lymphatic system and to kind of move toxins through the body. That's a great one. I like to do that right before I get in the shower. Just a nice little self-care thing, especially we talked about it being my birthday. I'm all about self-care today. And then peptides are another well, yes, which are parts that they're built on amino acids and kind of smaller proteins, but they're really, really effective when it comes to tailoring our diet and supplementation. So those are my well yeses.
Awesome, love it. Well, mine this week are on the topic of fats. There is a craze towards fats that don't have calories right now, which are highly engineered. That's my well no. And I'm just want to say I'm always suspicious when it comes to ultra processed foods, because there's limited research, of course. These tend to be new ingredients, and I don't want to sound like, like outdated, if you will, and I want to be open to innovation. But I think when it comes to foods, like we have seen this over and over again, the moment things get over-engineered, that tends to be more of a negative than a positive, in my opinion. So that's my well no. And I may be wrong for full transparency, but for now, I'm like, no, thank you. My well yes this week is like slow living. There's a big trend on TikTok, which is all about like slowing down, being a bit more present, and maybe not cramming in so many things during your day. And for me,
Yeah.
I think like specifically around food, I think slow living is so important. Like I think food is so much more than just getting fuel into the tank, as some people think about it. It's also like a social occasion. It's a moment to share with your loved ones. It's a moment to debate things. It's a moment to, you know, talk about recipes that other people are, really into. And I think food is so important when it comes to our health and wellness,
Yeah.
and not just the food that we're eating, but also the way we prepared, the time we're taking, the social aspect of food. So slow living is a huge trend that I'm like really like loving right now. Hopefully I can implement it in my own life a bit more, but I do think it's a great trend. So these are my well yeses and well nos for this week. And for our next segment, you know how that goes. We're doing our RD rapid fire. We're getting tons of questions from customers, listeners, etc. I would love to get your perspective on the topic of fats, like for the following, the following fats I'll read out to you, how would you rate them on a scale from 0 to 10? 0 being probably not really good or really terrible, if you will, and 10 being extremely good for you. So let's start here. So rapid fire fats. Salmon,
8,
sardines,
10,
Greek yogurt,
6,
bacon.
4,
I was praying for a higher number. Hemp,
10,
flaxseed,
10,
eggs.
10.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I know.
They always say to eat less eggs if you have high cholesterol. Is that true or not?
Oh, we should have talked about that. There's so much controversy there. Oh gosh. Yes and no.
All right, we keep that for another episode.
Quantity, quality.
Peanut butter.
6,
And on the topic of butters, almond butter.
7.
Regular butter.
Ooh, 5,
Margarine.
0.
And then obviously my all-time favorite, I can't believe it's not butter.
Oh yes, Fabio, darling. 0.
Avocados,
10,
pistachios,
9,
steak,
7,
ice cream.
6.
And then there's a big trend towards like milk right now as well. Regular full-fat milk.
For kids, fine. 3.
All right.
Not one of my favorites, but that's
That's
okay.
that's all we had for this week. Thank you so much, Sarah, as always.
You're welcome.
And I just want to say thank you for listening as well, everyone. And if you liked our podcast, please give us a like, subscribe to it, and share with your friends. Of course, if you have questions, just drop them in the comment section below. And I also want to thank our producer, Brooke, and our production assistant, Fatima. So, Sarah, thank you. As always, it was so insightful. I feel like I learned a lot about fats today.
You're so welcome.